Okay. Hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to another LinkedIn live session. So this session, we're talking about the role and importance of strategic communications in crisis management. Okay. All right. First of all, let me introduce myself and our host for today. My name is Karen Azubike. I'll be moderating the session. And we also have Mrs. Shola Abdulu, the principal consultant of, she's saying hi, the principal consultant of Shola Abdulu and Associates. Okay. She'll be our speaker for today and she's also hosting this session. We are really, really glad to have every one of you. Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so this is going to be very interactive. Yeah, so I want to first of all be sure that everyone can hear me. I need emojis, smiley, anything. I want to be sure. I want to be sure that everyone can hear me. Okay. Okay.
I think they can hear you.
Okay, okay, I believe so. All right, so you're welcome once again. So we are going to be, like I said, it's going to be interactive. So we were going to take questions 30 minutes into the session. Yeah, so you can write your questions down, then just put them in the comment section. All right. So let's get right to it. All right, yes, you can hear me. Thank you very much. All right, so Essay, you're welcome. We're really, really glad to have you speak to us on the role and importance of strategic communication in crisis management. Yes, so we know that strategic communication is very well used, but I know it's not a buzzword. Yeah, and a lot of us don't actually know what it means. So, Essay, please, what is strategic communication?
So yes, thank you, Karen, and welcome to everyone that is joining. And yes, so let's get into it. So strategic communication, I always like to start with definitions. Those of you who join our sessions, you know that we try to contextualize the conversation for the day so that people then know this is what we're talking about and they can frame their questions in that context. So our title is The Role and Importance of Strategic Communication in Crisis Management. We're going to be talking about crisis management, but let's first talk about what strategic communication is. So strategic communication is exactly like it sounds. It's the purposeful use of communication to achieve a specific outcome or to fulfill a mission. And as funny as that sounds, because when you say, just like what Karen said, it sounds like a buzzword, but what strategic communications acknowledges is the fact that sometimes communication is not purposeful. A lot of times it's like, for instance, I can just be like, oh my goodness, I need to tell people this. It could be spontaneous. Communications can also just be reactive. In fact, many times it is. Communications can be proactive, but communications, for it to be strategic, it is when you sit down, you analyze, you think about what you want to get out of something, you think about the outcome, you think about the individuals, and then you plan a sequence of activities both on the communications and engagement side to help you get to the outcome. That is what is called strategic communication, and it is used mostly by businesses, brands, organizations, and individuals. It is used in a case where the you really need to achieve the outcomes. You are not, you must achieve what you want. So that's what we mean when we say strategic communications. Back to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Essay. So, from what I could hear, the summary of this definition is intentionality. It has to be step by step, step by step. Yes. Thank you so much, Essay. Okay, so putting strategic communications in crisis management. First of all, what is a crisis, and how does a business organization know they're in a crisis? Okay, yes, we want to take this strategic communications and implement it in crisis management. So what's a crisis, first of all, and how does a business organization know they're in a crisis? Essay, please.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I would say, what is a crisis, first of all? A crisis is any situation where you find yourself where, I mean, the way I try to define it, because there are many ways you can look at it. You can say, some people say a crisis is when something unexpected happens, it overwhelms the operations, blah, 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 blah. For me, a crisis, and this is a definition that I got from my former work life, is a point when, first of all, your reputation is under threat. Forget whatever it is the circumstances may have been. Forget, because there are some things whereby bad things happen, but it's not really affecting your reputation. But once your reputation is being threatened, you are in a crisis. If stakeholders, people are beginning to call you, like I remember some people when they have some personal, something comes out on social media very damaging about them, they will be like, oh, I've been on the phone since morning, my phone is ringing off, I've gotten 40 calls in a day, that sort of thing. Your parents, family, friends, people are calling you the same, everybody's sending you the same video. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? You're in a crisis. If you're an individual, you're in a personal crisis. Then if it is now affecting your ability to operate, your societal operation. So let's assume you're a business or a brand. People are beginning to question, should these people be operating this facility? Should they be here? Shouldn't the government step in and revoke their license? Should we close down this school, close down this hospital? Do you understand? If those three are happening at the same time, you are in a crisis. You are in a major crisis. So that's it. Reputation, license to operate. In other words, societal goodwill is being. People are beginning to, draw it away from you, and stakeholders are getting agitated.
Thank you so much, Essay. When you're in, okay, aside personal crisis, organizational crisis, your business in a crisis, when your reputation is under threat, honestly, a lot of organizations don't really put their minds to their reputation. They're like, okay, we're making profits, business is going fine, and let's just go in. But it's really, really key. License to operate. Your business can close down. Ah, okay. Thank you so much for that essay. So our next question. Okay, so we already know what a crisis is. We already know when we're in a crisis, even personal and in an organization. Okay, so we want to know what is the relationship between crisis communications and crisis management. Crisis communication, crisis management. What's the relationship between crisis communication and how is it different from crisis management? Okay, what's the difference and what's the connection? The difference, the connection, crisis communication, crisis management. Essay.
Thank you, Karen. I like the way you emphasize that difference, connection, very, very important. So, yes, so crisis management is the entire process of how you manage a crisis. It involves, if I want to look at it breaking down, it involves the people that are responding to the incident that happened, maybe assuming it's a customer service issue. So it involves both the decisions you make about resolving those customer issues. It also involves the communications response. It involves the things you need to do on the policy side, on the process side. So the whole management of that crisis, of which communications is a central part, but it is not the only part. Why I say this is because in crisis management, you need to take action on things. But then why communication is at the heart of crisis management, in that when an issue has come to the fore and your reputation is being attacked, you have to go back, you have to go out and address the issues that have been raised about whatever it is that is going on. But it's not just to go out and say, oh, what they're saying is not true. If there is action you need to take, like to say, for instance, we are cooperating with the authorities on investigating, or we have actually deployed emergency response to the site, or whatever it is it may be, or we're working to, like the outage that happened last week where banks and all of that, we're working to control. So there is stuff that there are things you must say. There's the communication side, but there's also the management, the actual on-ground management of the issue. So they are different, but they are interconnected. Now, a good crisis management process should have a strong leader, a functional leader, most likely organizational, the whole business leader, whoever is the number one in that organization should be leading the crisis management effort. Then crisis communications will support it, will support the effort. The crisis communications lead should be the at the heart of the response around it. So supporting the crisis leader plus the crisis communications lead, and then somebody else holding another role, sort of like coordinating what's going on. And then you have the extended crisis management team, which will be made of maybe like whether customer service, whoever that is involved, or operations, procurement, finance, depending on what kind of issue you are faced with. So that's it. So it's interconnected in a lot of ways, but I like to draw a distinction between the two, because if you do not recognize the importance of crisis communications, you will not put in place the structure to maintain it, and you will focus only on the actions, and you will not focus on the engagement and the communications and the stakeholder mapping and stakeholder management that should happen in that communication space. So when I see an organization, and there are many of them, I just don't like to name and shame, but whenever I see a crisis being mismanaged and there's no consistency of messaging, and I see them pushing out messaging that the other party is debunking, and I can tell that you don't have a crisis management structure. Because if you do, your communications would have been stress tested, it would have been synergized, it would have been integrated. You will not go out and say something that people can easily cut down. Do you understand? So that weakness shows. So you cannot have crisis communications going out on its own without having that management structure, because if not, you will go and say something that is not operationally correct. And then when you say it, people will push back and say it's a lie. It's not true. You people did not do this, or that is not, you have not, do you understand? And I see that happening. Like I said, I don't want to name and shame, but there's some very recent cases of that I've seen where I'm wondering, is it that you people did not did you not check with the business leaders? Is there, before you went out and said this, is there no integrated management structure? So and in the political setting, you see this also along. So that's it. So it's different, but it's interconnected. If you do not have that structure coordinating the management, including communications, you will mess up your crisis response, and it's likely you will continue to have problems. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Effie. Wow. I want to believe we're all following because they're tangible nuggets that are coming in. So Essay just mentioned, okay, she just talked about crisis management and crisis communication. So I believe the summary of all of this is the proper communication, properly communicating in a crisis would, like, more like putting it in the management process, very very key, and it has to be it has to be the mistakes have to be minimal, because I can imagine, correct, because she just said a lot of organizations, especially in this part of the world, a lot of things go really bad just because it wasn't the crisis wasn't managed properly. Okay, so before I go to the next question, please, I want to be sure we're following. So I can get an emoji, comments, just how you're already feeling. Okay, I believe I'll get that. Mr. Steven, I can see you. Thank you so much. All right, so the next question. We already know the differences, and we already know how crisis communication and crisis management connects. Yeah, so we're getting to the core of what we're talking about. So, what is the role, Essay, please? What's the role of strategic communication in crisis management? What are the various steps you must take, you must pass through? What's the role? How does communications, strategic communication, fit into the crisis management talk? Essay. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
So thanks, Karen. So strategic communications, how it, I mean, first of all, how does it fits into, I mean, I've talked a little bit about this already. It's an integral part of crisis management, and it has to be structured. Part of the strategy of strategic communications is the fact that you have to be very reasoned about what you're doing. There are several steps that you must take in crisis communications and management that should really take you to the point whereby you deliver what you want to achieve. You have to be purposeful, it must be structured, it must be intuitive. It actually uses several frameworks, all in all. It uses, for instance, if you're actually when you're doing strategic communications and crisis management, you start off with the, first of all, framing of the problem. In other words, what exactly is going on here? And then you then move into the stakeholder mapping element as to who is saying what are the issues that they have against us? What are they saying? What are we hearing? What should we do differently? What are the actions that are pending on our behalf? And what should we do? So there's an element of issues management in it. There's an element of stakeholder management, and very, very importantly, there's an element of strategic communications. The role of strategic communications is to bring all of that together. And again, I like to really hammer on these strategic communications, because strategic communications does not leave room for error. So you don't make any assumptions about your audience. You don't make any assumptions about the stakeholders. You don't make assumptions about whether this you don't make assumptions, in short. So you pay attention to what is going on. You don't undermine anybody. I mean, even in Nigeria, we've seen how some people have become very strong voices on certain issues. They become very influential within a very short period of time. Some in January, nobody knew them. By this time, they have become a household name. That's influence. So if that person is taking a antagonistic position against you or your brand or your business, and it's getting traction, you can't ignore it. So that's what strategic communication does. It doesn't work based on emotion and say, no, I'm too big a brand to be engaging with this kind of person or this kind of people, they're below my, we don't know. We look at the situation as it is, not how I think it should be or what makes sense to me. Whenever I'm in conversations with, maybe business leaders, and I see them dismissing certain conversation, I'm like, it always gives me a sense of, oh, okay, wow. Oh, so you want to wait until it becomes a big problem before you pay attention to this. No, you should not. That's a very important part of strategic communications. You pay attention to, you follow the conversation, both negative and positive. Follow it, watch over it. It's almost like when you are building a garden and the weeds are growing. If you don't, will you wait until the weed reaches the size of the maize before you realize you have a problem? You have a major issue at that point. So if you are observing, you should be aiming to remove the weeds while they are still at ground level. That's exactly what strategic communication does. It doesn't take anything. It doesn't. It takes cognizance of what's going on, and it's watching over everything that is happening to ensure that things do not get out of control. We respond to what we need to respond to. We address what needs to be addressed, and we recognize the risk, and we manage it as ethically and as sustainably as possible. Back to you.
Thank you so much. We've all heard it from SA. Communication is the key. Follow the conversation, both positive and negative. Don't leave anything out. Okay, don't sideline anything. Follow the conversation from the very beginning. Thank you so much for that essay. Okay, moving on to our next question. So, how is crisis communication different from regular communication and issues management communication? Because now this issue has already brought to the floor. There are issues, there's an issue, and there's a crisis. Okay, so how is crisis communication different from the regular communication and issues management communication? Yes, Essie.
Okay, so thanks. So, it's the main difference is the sensitivity of it all. I would always say, definitely with strategic communications, if you are somebody who does strategic communications, the difference may not be so much because you're applying the same principles across board. And what that means is that you are paying attention to what the interests of the stakeholders are, what the issues are, what people need to know, how you want them to feel, and what action you need. So those fundamental principles, they are the same, whether it's issues management, whether it's crisis. The problem with crisis is that there's very little room for error. As opposed to, for instance, if I'm doing a campaign and I'm launching a product or that kind of thing, if I make a mistake, maybe all that is at stake is just the product launch. And if it's not a major project, major product, it's not like, the be all and end all for my brand. It's not a big deal. Even if it's a big deal, it's just that product's line. Perhaps I can tweak the campaign in the next few days. It's not, it shouldn't be a major thing, except there's a major problem with the product, in which case that's a crisis. It's no longer just the product. Yeah, it's no longer normal communications. But if I did a product launch and it turned out that there was a safety issue, people are saying this is, whatever ahead, and that one has become crisis now, reputation, But if it was just a slight, oh yeah, they didn't start on time, the things a little bit, it's not yet reputation damaging, it's not licensed to operate, it's not affecting stakeholders, then it's something that you can just address and adjust and tweak. Some people may not even notice that anything was wrong. But in a crisis, everybody's eyes are on you. That's why it's called a crisis. And it's important that leaders understand this. To be honest, I see a lot of a lack of understanding about the potency of issues. I get involved in a lot of things, on a pro bono basis and all of that. And I can tell when a situation is, as a man, this is not good. Oh, this is not good. But it's surprising me that When I discuss with some people, they'll be like, no, 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 it's not a big deal. I'll be like, what? Are we looking at are we looking at the same thing? You know, and eventually, most of the time, 9 out of 10, because I know what to look out for. Eventually, it always goes that way because the warning signs are there. I always say that the only crisis that doesn't give warning sign is natural disaster. And even that one, I mean, in fact, maybe pandemic, and even that one, if like you can see in the US, if you have good meteorological agencies, they will tell you hurricane is coming, volcano is going to erupt, you know, and all of that. It's only, I mean, I don't know, maybe act of, they call it act of God, yeah, but I don't think God does bad things. But you know what I mean? It's only those very terrible things that just happen like that. Most of the time, issues are slow burn. It will have been bubbling for a while and then you get to know. So crisis communications, there's no room for error. Another very important thing about crisis communication, you need to have a team that was trained beforehand. Because if you do not have a crisis communications team trained beforehand, you will mess up. In fact, this one just became aware to me recently because there was something that I was involved with, which I can't go into details about. And I realized that people did not understand that they had moved into the crisis phase, so they were still doing promotional comms. And so imagine you are in a situation where there's fire on the mountain. I'm going to your page and I'm seeing you are tweeting some things that don't make sense. Do you understand? As in, it's not there's nothing on your social media to show the seriousness of what's going on, and you don't even know that that is unacceptable. So I later, I mean, I have always known this from my former place of work, but I saw how this particular, they struggled to realize that they were now in a crisis and they did not have a crisis communication structure or a crisis trained comms team. So even though they had a comms team on ground, they were unable to segue into crisis mode because it's a different type of communications. Is at that point, is advocacy, is influencing, and they were in a very complex crisis. So that really brought it home for me that honestly, I've always known there was a big difference, but it became more clear to me that depending on the kind of work you are involved in, and this is even more necessary in politics, but also government agencies, you need to have a crisis communications team trained separately. You will pull people from your normal communications, they will be trained. You will only pull them into crisis mode when necessary, but they know what to do. They know the kind of images they need to go after. They need the stories. They know the urgency of the matter. They know the tone, the language. In fact, I can't just go into details. It's a different world. In fact, it's a different world because promotional. You can be playing games. You can be doing dancing video. You want to do dancing video during crisis? Are you okay? Do you understand? In fact, when you are in that crisis mode, all of your channels, the content should change. Everything. But if your team is not trained, they do not understand that, they won't be able to make that shift. So again, you see this whole thing about having a structure around it, because once you have that structure, you have a structure for activating a crisis, for knowing when there's a crisis. You have a structure for managing. You also have a structure for the communication support team is also trained. Once the crisis is declared, you activate that support team, and then they start doing. Of course, they will take over the channels, and then they start deciding, a press statement they put on the website, they put on social, and all of that. Then all of that, whatever dancing promotional thing they're supposed to have that was on the schedule before this crisis hit, you set it apart, and then you start running your issues, your crisis communications for that period. So when I see an organization where you are in a full-blown crisis, maybe even of national level, and then you are still doing promotional things at the same time on your social media, in fact, you don't even know what you are doing. So it's completely different. That's it.
I see. Wow, it's a lot. Okay, we'll start taking questions now. So you can drop your questions in the comments. Yeah, thank you. Okay, just doing a little recap of what Essie just said. It all boils down to making sure there's something she said. Let there be a team that is ready. They are equipped to know how to handle communications in a crisis, how to manage the entire situation. If not, everything goes bad. It goes sour. Ah, Because I can imagine if there's a big volcano of problem, and just like she said, you're now dancing and all, it's crazy. Ah, well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for opening our eyes to knowing that there has to be a team. There has to be a team that will know what to do. Like once it starts, they know what to do. They're in place. They know what to say. They know what to upload. They know what to bring down and all that. Thank you so much, Essie. All right, moving on to the next question. Okay, so we already know the differences between normal communication, regular communications, and all that. So you have, of course, you're a veteran. We know you're a veteran in this field. So, in the course of your journey, in your communication journey, what are the common mistakes that you have observed in crisis communication?
In fact, there's a long list, a very, very long list. And as Karen said, please start dropping your questions if you have them, because I can see some of us were listening. If you don't have any questions, that's also fine. But please just like Choma did, thank you very much for dropping your comments, Choma. Just keep dropping questions, I mean comments, so that we know that you are here with us and recapping for other people that will watch this when the time comes up. So I have a list of comments, common mistakes, and I'm just going to run through them. So one of them is, first of all, taking an inside or internal view of the issue. That's a big mistake. In other words, and I see this happen all the time. You are looking at it like, oh, you are looking based on. You are saying, but we did the right thing. And why are they saying this? Do they even know what we are going through? I'm like, really? How? This is you. You are inside your boardroom, or you are inside your office, and you are talking about the people know what you are doing. Have you told them? Do they know? People don't know, and they're agitated. So it's not about how you feel, whether you think you're right or not. The point is that there is an issue, people are concerned. So how do we get people to understand our point of view? How do we provide the assurance that people need? So it's not really about whether it's a lie. It's not about whether, oh, it's a malicious story. They just want to get at us, and it's just social media noise. It's about your reputation is at stake. How are you going to make sure, how are you going to protect your reputation? It's not a time for sentiment. It's not a time also for thinking, oh, it doesn't matter, brushing over issues. So that's one common mistake. Don't look at the issue from your internal perspective. In fact, if it's a complex issue, you have to look at it from the perspective of the stakeholder, from the outside. So if people are thinking you've done things very, in fact, it is that sentiment you should bring into the response. Because if you don't bring that sentiment into the response, your response will not hit the mark. People will be like, can you, and I say this a lot in some of the crises we've had with education, particularly schools in Nigeria, whenever they have those issues, around care and all of that. They are so concerned with, oh, we did the right thing. Why are they telling us? They're not thinking about how the public is viewing what is going on. So 9 out of 10 of times, they handle the things so wrongly. I'm yet to see one school that handled any of their crises well. Some of them, they recovered after a while, but all of them, communications completely off, assessment of the situation completely off, and then the response is, in fact, most of the time, the escalation is even due to their response rather than what happened. So that is a major problem. Don't look at it from your perspective. Just try, cognitive dissonance. Try and look at it from the external perspective. Whether you agree with it or not, it will help you manage it. And the communications people should be the front and center of bringing that external perspective in. So another one is people not thinking about what they know, the feel, and the do. In other words, what do we need the stakeholders or the audience or people or government or whoever, what do we want them to know? How do you want them to feel about us? And what do we want them to do? So not being clear about what the ask is and what the outcomes you want from that process is, and just going out and be like, oh, I just want this thing to end. But you're not really being strategic about it in terms of, okay, even though this crisis has come, how do I want people to feel about us? Because if you think about how you want people to feel about you, you will be a little bit more, do you understand? Your tone, your everything will be some decisions that you will make, like, oh, issuing a cease and desist to media people, which, by the way, I don't even understand why anybody would do that. You will not do that because you want to be seen as somebody who is being conciliatory and is trying to actually do the right thing. So I think also another common mistake is people not bridging the say and the do gap. They think it's enough to just say, oh, this is rubbish and we're not, it's not true. But they're not thinking about, what should I do? So there's a tell and show in crisis communications many times. So because you cannot just say, don't think that just because you say it, you should take your word for it. So if there are images out there that are contrary to, that are painting a narrative that is not friendly or nice or constructive, then show us something different. So don't just tell, do the tell and show. There are some things that you can shut down with telling alone, but if there is a show, particularly if do that, please be visual as much as possible and give data that can be supported and verified. So I think those are some of the things. Avoiding the issue, that is also a major problem that people mistake, thinking that it will go away. Then being deceptive or trying to deceive people, telling lies. Oh my God, that's the worst one. And unfortunately, political people are the best at doing that. Propaganda. I don't get it. Something that that as you issue the press statement, you are going to be fact checked within 30 seconds. In in 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 hour, it's going to be obvious to everybody that you've lied, and nobody's going to believe you. You don't have a credible voice. Do you know what it means as a political leader that you don't have a credible voice? But again, like I said, for many people, some of these things don't matter. But I know that one day the chickens will come home to roost. That's what I observe in crisis management. So eventually you may be getting away with it for now, but one day the chickens will come home to roost. So another common mistake, not managing your stakeholders well. In other words, people who you should have engaged. When you do your stakeholder mapping, they are the what we call the red box stakeholders, who are at the top of the people who you should manage proactively. If you do not manage them well, you don't have the engagement with them behind, and all of that. Again, if I use that school example, education example, many of them don't manage the family, the people who they mismanage those relationships, and that's the most important stakeholder at that point in time. They treat them like antagonists, whereas all of the public is getting involved in the issue because of that family. So at that time, they are the most influential stakeholder, not your board, not your lawyers, not your proprietress or whoever. That person who is whipping up sentiment, those are the people you should engage. So now being mismanaging that relationship, in fact, I to be honest, I don't really know, I don't understand. I haven't seen one person, one school that approach has worked out for. And like I said, I'm using them as an example, but this also plays out with corporate organizations as well. So not mismanaging your stakeholders, not engaging with the key ones as much as possible. And then, okay, so also overreaction is also a problem, because sometimes in a crisis, you may, in your agitation to, oh, why are they making all this noise? They want to stop my business. You now do knee-jerk reaction and you do what you're not supposed to do. That happens a lot. And I see that when people, they fall straight into the legal mode, the first thing they call their lawyers, they are issuing cease and desist, where I'm like, I don't even understand that call your lawyer thing. As an allegation was made against you, you can just tell them, you can shut it down and debunk it and say, this is false, this is incorrect. At least do that first before why should the legal threats be the first thing that you would do? And I would never advise a client to issue a cease and desist to the members of the public. That is very disrespectful. To the media also, it doesn't pay off, because eventually, if you're a big organization, you need the media on your side. So to private individuals, if there's defamation, well, I mean, you reserve the right to do that. But think very clearly, very careful about when you take the legal approach, because if you are a public brand and you have a public profile, it may not go down well. There's some things you can shut down on the basis of just, this is factually incorrect and we do not like this, and just, say that with a very solid media response. And if that isn't working, then perhaps you can explore the other option. The legal heavy might approach should not be the knee jerk. I think a lot of overreaction in this space, to be honest. So that those are the ones I want to draw attention to. Also, playing ostrich, thinking the crisis will go away, is not the way to go. And I think in Nigeria now, I think that playing ostrich, I see that people are becoming more aware, particularly when it's gaining traction on social media. I think I see that less now. People are not, in those days, they used to try to ignore it. I think people are more, they've learned from some other public cases, which I won't want to mention. But what I now see is an overreaction in some cases, where people are, then rushing, doing the legal thing. And then some, again, like in the political space, government, those will just come and lie. They just say things that are not true. All of that, that's a very common mistake. The business people hardly tell lies. What the business people tend to do is they withhold information. So they will tell you something that is not a lie, but they're not telling you the full truth. But the political people, they will wholehearted, complete lie, as in it's a big lie. As I say, it's just not good. And it's not professional either.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. I don't okay, before we continue, if you just joined in, so we're talking about the role and importance of strategic communication in crisis management. Okay. We are already halfway into the session, but you can listen and also drop your questions now. We are taking questions now. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Essie. So the question she just answered is the common mistakes, because she has been in this communication journey for quite a number of years. Yeah. So the common mistakes, two very, very sensitive I got from what she just said. Bridging the gap between the say and do. You can't say something and now do something else. You come out in the midst of the and you come out and you just see, we're trying to salvage the issue, and you're doing something different when they go to your website or when they go to your page, and you're wondering, why is the crisis still there? What's happening? Okay, that's one very, very, very major mistake. And just shortly, lying. Why do you have to lie? Why do you have to lie? Okay, she said the business people don't lie, but they withhold information, which is not professional, according to her. Please, okay. Well, God will help us. All right. So going to our next question. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for everything that essay. We are grateful. And I believe we're all getting very, very familiar with this topic. Okay. So our next question. We've already seen the mistakes. We've already seen what organizations, what people do wrong, okay, in crisis communication. So what would you say are best practices in crisis communication? Let's see.
So to be honest, I mean, best practices is the opposite of everything that I have said, which I said in terms of the common mistakes. So it's about, first of all, not ignoring the issue, framing the nature of the problem appropriately, being aware of the seriousness of what's going on, not ignoring issues, addressing it, doing your stakeholder mapping well, and then knowing the people that need to be properly engaged and managing those relationships well. To be honest, and maybe because I've been in this space, like you said, for a while, I am yet to see a stakeholder that you cannot manage. I'm yet to see. Because if you really pay attention to that stakeholder, one thing that I learned in stakeholder management, in both in crisis context and issues and steady state, is you use the stakeholders' behavior. Let the stakeholder teach you how to engage with them. In other words, listen to what they say. These days of social media, if it's someone that is very active on social media, spend time to go through the person's feed. See what the things they are passionate about. Watch their history over time. Observe, what kind of person am I dealing with? Or what kind of individuals am I dealing with? What is their motivation? What is their interest? What is their concern? What language do they speak? And how do you understand? So so that will guide you in terms of your messaging and the approach that you will take to engage with them, particularly if there are people that you choose to engage with or you have to engage with. There are some people that I know that you may choose not to engage with because of the stance they've taken and all of that. But then you need to understand them so that you can manage the chaos or whatever it is that they're trying to build. So your messaging, you can then decide to be deploying messaging to counter maybe the false information or the fake news or whatever, or the misinformation coming from that angle. But then you have to know what they're saying and why people are giving credibility to what they're saying so that you can counter it and counter it well. So if you're not studying your stakeholders well, you're not paying attention, you're not listening, you're not following the conversation, you do not understand the sentiment or the values or the beliefs of the people that you're talking, you're just being like, yeah, you will be surprised. By the time everybody believes their side of the story, you'll be wondering, how could they believe this? It's so untrue. But you were not even following the conversation. So you didn't know. You don't know what they were saying that sounded credible, that everybody then believed. You also fail to realize that your voice is not the strongest in the conversation. So those are the things I would say. Not paying attention to the conversation. I want to keep saying this. What are people saying about you? Not paying attention to that is a major problem. So best practice is following that conversation, paying attention to the narrative that is going out about you during a crisis, and then making sure that you address any sort of misinformation, and you craft a narrative that addresses the issue, that calms the stakeholders and de-escalates the crisis in a sustainable and in an ethical manner. So you also watch over the sentiment as well. So I would say, if I want to look at the 5 things that I watch out for in a crisis, and this is on the crisis communication side, I watch the narrative, I watch the language, I watch the content, what is coming out from the other side, and I watch the tone. So narrative, sentiment, content, language, and sentiment. So those are the things that I watch out for. And then we then have a counter response. And at all times, we have a desired outcome. I have an outcome in terms of the kind of narrative I would want to push out. I have an outcome in terms of the tone of the communications that must come out, bearing in mind the overall context. So if, for instance, like in the educational example I gave, there's a lot of sentiment, people feel bad because of what has happened. My tone cannot be defensive. My tone cannot be antagonistic. My tone cannot be accusatory. It has to be a sense of understanding the gravity of what's going on and wanting to make things, better. However, it doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't mean I should accept responsibility for what I know that you didn't do. But I'm saying the tone should be such that it helps to, it helps you to achieve your outcome, and it puts, in a way it's conciliatory. That's just the best word I can use. And that, again, I'm not saying use one tone for every crisis. Sometimes you need a very strong response, but you have to evaluate everything in the full ramifications and then respond appropriately. So that's what you mean by strategic communication. Because if you don't, you will have a one-size-fits-all approach. And sometimes a strong, very strong and harsh response may be required, but that cannot be the way you communicate all the time. And even for me, if you understand, again, that's another thing. If you have professional communications experts, I mean, we all know the good thing about the English language is that you can communicate without being abusive. I can tell you, man, you are talking rubbish without using those words. You understand? You can cleverly write that, man, this is not, I mean, in British English, you can communicate and say, well, there is no evidence to support what he or she has said. In other words, what they are saying, the person has told you, you are lying. But the person did not use the word lie. They said there's no evidence to support what you have said. Finish. It's equal to you are a liar. But it's different from me saying you are lying. That's the difference. So knowing how to use language to your advantage is an important part of crisis communications, which is why I keep on saying, if you have not gotten the training, the skill, and the expertise, and to be honest, like I said, I get brought into a lot of things. Crisis management is my thing. I really love it. I study crisis everywhere in the world. I see how people manage it on the business side, political side, because so that the day people ask me to come and, to advise, I can draw on so many examples. And what I see that works most of the time is situating yourself in the context, paying attention to what is happening 360 degrees around you, not just what is in front of you, what your friends are telling you, what your family, but what is happening everywhere. In social media, online, what is the conversation? And how is it affecting people's perception about you? And then working to address, to change that, or to correct, or to resolve as it may be. Again, like I said, it all depends on how big a brand you are or how big the issue is. There's some, like I said, there's some names examples I would have liked to give, but it looks like a name and a shame. But the inability to manage that is I mean, if I give the example, for instance, of this rapper in the US right now, of course, his own case, that one is already a bad case. The evidence against him is extremely damaging. But I read a statement that he issued, like, I think he tweeted also, and it was funny. I was just like, it was the most, I'm sorry, it was a very, I just couldn't understand that. I was like, you should have shut up. This doesn't even make sense. Why are you saying this? I mean, we have videos of everything. People are talking now. The allegations against you are so serious, and this is all you have to say, that somebody is witch hunting you. Are you serious? Did you or did you not do this? You know what I'm saying? So it's just, so that's it. Knowing the gravity of a situation, not from your own perspective, but from the external side. And therefore knowing what to say. And sometimes, like I said, maybe sometimes, like in this case, if you don't have anything to say in your defense, then please shut up, rather than going out and saying what you should not say. So again, it's about being strategic. It's also being intentional, being purposeful. And again, what does success look like? I think the first question, like when we did our crisis management training, in my former work life, the first question they used to ask us is that when you start a crisis management effort, you should ask yourself, how do I want to be remembered? Because that would determine how you go about what you do. I think, for instance, our political leaders don't ask themselves that question, which is why they do a lot of the things that they do. Because if you think about how you want to be remembered, you'll be a little bit more careful about propaganda statements that are inaccurate, that could be fact checked, and all of that. And I'm yet to see a leader who doesn't want to be remembered positively. I'm yet to see one. Even the most despotic leader wants to be remembered positively. So why then would you have a communication strategy that is likely to ensure that history will be unkind to you? That's the mismatch I don't understand. Because there's nobody who has a bigger ego than political leaders. Why then do you have a communications strategy that is not working, will not work in your long-term interest? So yeah, back to
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much, Essay. That's a lot to that's a lot of sinking in. Okay, you our audience, please, you can just show emojis how this session is going for you, because for me it's mind blowing. Okay, Essay is exposing us to a lot of to the bigger picture, okay, of crisis management. And she just answered the question of best practice. Okay, I think the whole talks about knowing what to do at a particular time, at a particular time of the crisis, it boils down to having a team. Having a team, yes, of course, depending on how big the crisis is, but having a team that knows, yes, thank you, Leslie Luju. Thank you so much. Having a team that knows, okay, looking at the narrative, okay, what is coming in, the content, what is the message that's coming in, the sentiment, very, 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 very important. Sentiment. Thank you, Leslie, for putting it out there. Sentiment, content, language, tone. Yes, you can't get all these things right and it turns out bad. It's not possible. Okay, following everything, following these steps, knowing what to change, knowing what to tweak, and knowing, just like Essie said, knowing when to be strong. Okay, when you're communicating, when to have it's hmm. Well, I believe we're getting really, really fast from a lot of insights coming in. Okay, we're already towards wrapping up. It has been an amazing, amazing session. So, Esther, we know you are running an issues crisis and reputation management course on the 31st of October this year. Okay, so we just want to know what what do we expect? What's okay when we register, when we enroll, what are the things that we're going to learn on that day from your course? Thank you, Essie.
So yes, so thanks, thank you very much, Karen. So yes, we have the issues crisis and reputation management course coming up on 31st of October. We've launched a lot of courses this year and we've had a lot of people join. We have trained about 72 people so far. This is the second cohort and I'm really looking forward to it. And no cohorts are the same. We focus on, there's a lot that we can cover, but we focus on, the basics, and then depending on the people in the room and sort of case studies, we then take a very targeted approach. And I would say, if you are working in an organization as a communications leader or as a leader generally, and you interface a lot with the public, you are in either of these institutions: food, safety, energy, construction, mining, banking, public sector. In other words, beauty or skincare. You are involved in anything that could be a health hazard to people, a safety hazard, or an environmental hazard, or you just deal with members of the public on the daily, like banks or hospitals, schools. You need to be crisis management trained and crisis communications trained. And if your organization is not training you, ideally your organization should be training you. So I would expect that some of you, if you're working somewhere, you should advocate for them to do so. But if they are not training you, you had better train yourself. Because I kid you not, but the crisis does not give notice. And when it comes, people will not know that you don't have crisis communications training. I'm telling you for oh Lord, I can't even tell you. I had to be in the organization I was working in before. I did my crisis management training like 15 years after practicing, as I was already a seasoned professional. In fact, I was already a team leader. I was already a manager, I think, because then I was nominated to become the crisis communications lead. So I had to go through the training, because nobody can run the risk that when the time comes, I do not know the urgency. Now, let me tell you, not only that I was trained as a member of the core team, my communications, we had to nominate a communication support team. And all these things, we'll cover it in the course. We're going to show people, if you want to set up a crisis support team, these are the kind of roles that need to be there. This is what they need to be able to do. And this is how it functions in a crisis. We also talk about the difference between social media crisis and normal crisis, a traditional media crisis, how you deploy all of them. So we would have it. So I would go for the training on the crisis management side as the crisis communications lead. Then my communication support team, I will run a training for them as well. So there was the CST training separate from the crisis management training. And all of it was bridging that gap between. So I would know how crisis management works. And then I would then have a team that I train to know. So once we activate, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. The person who's supposed to do the stakeholder mapping will go ahead and do it. The person who's supposed to draft the message knows what to do. The person who needs to go to the scenario planner and find out what the scenarios are, what are the scenarios we are working against, they know. The people doing the stakeholder engagement know that they need to go and contact the business, so that the business can tell them who are the stakeholders on the business side, so that when we're advising on stakeholders, we're not only advising based on media and the traditional stakeholders that we know, but also on the stakeholders on the business side, depending on what's going on at the time. So if you are a corporate communications manager or a communications lead, or you are a one-man show in a communications organization, and you are in any organization, including church, faith-based, because the day crisis comes in your church, if you like, go and be talking what you should not say. Do you understand? We've seen many cases not managing it well. Please sign up for the training. That's all I will say, because you will need it. If you are being trained, like me, I was trained in my organization, so I did not need to do external training. And the training in my organization was a multinational firm then. It was a very good training. And do you understand what I'm saying? It has stood the test of time, because based on that has been what has provided the building blocks for what I have learned, and I continue to use to study and build my own case studies and all of that. But if nobody is training you, and I don't want to give examples, but I'm telling you, even up till last week, I still see cases of, in fact, there was a particular case I was involved with. I had to tell them, this current structure you have will not deliver for you in this crisis. So I had to do a diagram of how they needed to, I had to draw a mini development of a communications crisis support team for them, to take them through the moment. That was when I just realized that. I mean, anyway, I can't say any more than that, but the point is, it is an act of self-care for your career. So like I said, even if you're not getting, I'm not saying sign up with SA and AO, but you had better, just if you're even unable to join, you just know there is a gap as a communications manager. And my prayer for you is that may a crisis not happen, because it's different from promotional. Even in my organization, we saw it. We had to train people. We had to learn how to communicate in it. It's completely different. And like I said, because of the sensitivity of crisis, and I do a lot of consulting work, I cannot disclose some of the things that I know behind the scenes, but the understanding that I have, or that we have after, based on training of the sensitivity of crisis, is what enables us to know what to look out for when a crisis kicks. And most of the time, hardly am I ever surprised. I know this sounds very immodest when I say so, and I give God the glory for the knowledge He has given us. But what I'm trying to make is that crisis gives indications, and if you are paying attention, you should be able to know the signals to know whether this is gaining traction, this is going to be a problem, and the problem is coming from here, and this is what we need to do. But if you are not trained, Because what crisis management does for you is that we evaluate case studies from different examples. So we learn from the mistakes of others. And that learning can only take place in a classroom. It cannot take place elsewhere. So if you're able to join us on the 31st of October, that's fine. But if not, well, I mean, get your training however you can. On my YouTube page, we do talk a little bit about crisis and all of that, but then we can't do, it's just 15-minute videos, 20-minute videos. We can't do crisis communication simulations, which we do in our courses. A lot of the feedback from our cohorts are always that they enjoy the simulations. They enjoy that because we create that scenario, we put you in it, and you have very little time to respond. And by the time we now come back and we discuss what you've done in plenary, you then, and I'll tell you, well, but did you consider this? You now realize, and for many of them, they're like, wow, it felt real. I say, yes, that's the idea. So you now know if you are ever in a crisis again, you know what to do. And I've had situations where people who attended my courses, in fact, there was a particular case that happened recently where when a crisis now broke up in our organization, she was able to alert them and say, look, you're not doing, no, what we're doing, we have to do this. She was able to tell them, and she's an HR person, but she knew. And she reached out to me, and eventually they did what they felt they needed to do. But what I mean is that because that's the thing, the ability to recognize that you're in a crisis, she was able to recognize it because she had gone through our training and she knew what to watch out for. As opposed to people who don't know when they're in a crisis. Don't mind them. It's those people on social media. That guy just likes making noise. Meanwhile, it is a complex crisis. So yes, you can see in the chat, Anibet, thanks for dropping that. That's our registration link. If you would like to join us on the 31st, discounts are ongoing, I think, until maybe I think to the 12th or the 13th. So you can still get that in if you sign up. But after that, it will be full cross price. We'd love to have you in class. We already have some people registered and we still have a few more spaces. So thanks everyone. And we didn't get any questions today, so I'm assuming you don't have questions. But if you have questions, please drop it in the comments. I will be going through the comments after the session, and then I could also respond as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Essie. Just to back up what she just said, the registration link is on the comment section. Yes, and discounts are still ongoing. So quickly register. So you've heard Essie. She has told you what you're going to learn. She has also explained the massive benefits, okay, after learning has taken place. And just like she said, a lot of all these things cannot be done except in a classroom, because she's putting you, the course will put you into real life situations. The simulations, you will be there. Okay, so you have to it's really going to be interactive. It's really going to be insightful. So hurry now and register. Yes, thank you so much for joining in. I believe, yes, thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you, Favor. Thank you, Leslie Lodri. Thank you so much for joining in on this session. And I believe that our notes are full. The nuggets are a lot. Okay, so just final words before we wrap up from Essie. Anything you need to say to our wonderful audience? Thank you, Damilola.
Thanks, Damilola, for joining. Thanks to Joseph. Thanks to Anibed, Favor as well. And Lissy, Julu, thank you so much. So thanks. And Karen, thank you too for moderating this session
Thank you.
at relatively short notice. Thank you so much. And yes, so much appreciated. I hope this was useful for you, everyone. I know that a lot of people, check on the videos afterwards and all of that. Plus, please keep the questions and the comments going as well. So thanks, and have a wonderful weekend ahead, and see you on the next live session. So
thank you. See you on the next live session. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.